Hey, this is Trevor from Halifax, calling in to say that I support Creative Control on Patreon because I think long-form arts journalism is a crucial part of music culture, and there's simply not enough of it out there today. Vish is a master interviewer, he lands great guests, and he has his finger on the pulse of the ever-changing music landscape, both here in Canada and abroad. For all of these reasons and many more, I think you should support Creative Control on Patreon too.
To make your flexible monthly donation to Creative Control, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control today. I'm Vish's wife, and I will love him no matter what you do. And now he has me on the record saying that.
Matthew Doc Dunn is a prolific visual artist, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, and singer based in Toronto, Ontario. The man behind Cosmic Range Records and also the band The Cosmic Range, who were in fact the backing band on US Girls' critically acclaimed 2018 album, A Poem Unlimited. Dunn has collaborated with a host of artists and released a slew of music on his own that challenges and defies easy musical categorization. His latest solo effort is called Upper Canada Blues, which has inspired him to play a rare solo show on January 16th at the Baby G in Toronto. Matthew invited me to his home in Toronto where we discussed his musical trajectory, the downsides of music tribalism and hardcore punk, celebrating heroic cultural figures when we should, his album Upper Canada Blues, his future plans, and much more. A part of the E1 Podcast Network with the support of listeners like you who subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, plus in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton. This is the 515th episode of Creative Control, featuring the earnestly opinionated Matthew Doc Dunn, with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Matthew. How's it going?
Good, Vish. How are you doing?
Well, thank you for having me in your home.
Oh, thanks for coming up. I appreciate it.
This is, you told me to meet you at the studio in Toronto. Mm-hmm. When I meet Toronto musicians at their studios, it's not as nice as this. You're in a nice home here. Mm-hmm. Tell me and the people listening, where are we? What is this place?
We're up in Midtown, around Yonge and Davisville. My living room is my recording studio. So it's where we've been working pretty much for the last couple years. The studio I had that I recorded the Lightborn record and Sacred Lamp and a whole bunch of the stuff that's been surfacing was at my old house on Lightborn Avenue, which basically the space you're looking at, Vish, was the basement.
Right.
And so it was a real tape studio.
Right, sure.
Kind of classic, Subterranean, Subterranean classic, but it is now relocated to the dining room.
Main floor space here.
Main floor space. It's a beautiful space. We call it the Manor.
The Manor.
It's the Manor. We recorded a bunch of records here over the years. A couple of the MV records.
Okay.
Yeah, the MV and EE records we recorded here way back.
Okay. Now for people listening, what does that mean? What is MV?
It's Matt Valentine and Erica Elder.
There you go.
Who are a couple who I've done work with for the last dozen years here and there. Matt, who's known as MV. He was in the band The Tower Recordings in the 90s, who are really one of my favorite bands, and connected with those guys 04, 05, I guess, somewhere like that.
Okay.
And played with them a bunch, especially in the late aughts, early teens, I guess.
Okay.
To speak in those terms. And yeah, we recorded some stuff here way back, and And yeah, I mean, I was rent-evicted and I ended up here.
Well, I think you turned out, it sounds based on your description of the Subterranean recording space, I think you fared well.
Yes, this is definitely a more Tony enterprise.
It's weird that you said that. That's the exact word as I was pulling my car up. I'm like, this is a Tony neighborhood. That's what I thought.
Well, I'm happy our adjectives are on the same page.
No, it's lovely. Now, I know you as something of a multi-hyphenate. You do lots of different things. What are all the things you do in the realms of music and other creative expression?
Well, the music thing, I guess, is got a few Hydra heads, I guess. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I guess...
You play everything, right? You can play basically every instrument.
I can play a lot of instruments. I can play, I mean, strings and drums are usually the things I start from.
Okay.
Pretty much. I started out as a drummer as a kid, fairly primitive, but...
Do you mean the instrument itself is fairly primitive? It
no,
is kinda.
Like I was fairly primitive, but in the truest sense.
I think everyone. I'm a drummer. Every time when you start playing drums, you feel like a caveman. You're like blah blah blah, and then eventually you pick up.
Eventually, it grows.
You refine it a little bit. Yeah.
So drums are the first thing I got into when I was a kid, and then I started playing guitars when I was 11 or 12, something like that, and so. I can play those instruments. I play the pedal steel. I'm playing vibraphone a lot lately. I grew up, actually that's not really true. Actually, my first instrument was the harmonica. I started playing harp first.
Like for real playing it, or just like the way I give like a 4-year-old harmonica?
No, I actually could kind of play a bit. Because I've always done this. I still do. I would play along with records. So, we had the Dylan records around, and I think my first exposure was probably seeing early Beatles when Lennon was playing. I think that was probably my first exposure to it.
Love Me Do or something.
Exactly.
Sure.
I think there's that great video of them, right? I think that if I could peel it back, I know Ringo definitely influenced me on the drums.
Absolutely.
Just watching him, especially the early stuff. That's like for a 6-year-old, 7, it's like that's
kind of roots of Ramones even there somehow.
Exactly.
Early Ringo, or early Beatles.
Yeah, that same energy, right?
Yeah,
just in it's like uplifting too,
And pretty not a ton. I mean, Ringo became known for some pretty unique fills. But I mean, early days, he's just actually, he would always do some fills. Now that I think about it, or rolls.
Yeah, he's a great drummer.
I always thought he was a great drummer. I still do.
My retort to anyone who turns their nose up is, it's like, so the guy on every Beatles record's a bad drummer. If he's a bad drummer, then hang it up.
Absolutely, one of my influences. Those Beatles were good. That was a good band.
Yeah, they could do some things.
They're worth celebrating, I would say. That band deserves more recognition.
Well, I was talking to an engineer last night who I was doing some work with, and we were talking about them. And the thing that no one talks about is the singing.
Yeah.
I mean, the singing. There aren't really better singers.
Well, I thought the singing was always something else, but then you spend any time with Abbey Road, which everyone's doing. As we're speaking, there's like a reissue coming out.
We were speaking of this last night.
Yeah. So I haven't heard anything they've put out about the reissue, but I just when I think of Abbey Road and some of the stuff they did on that record in particular, which was kind of this weird throwback to their early days, that harmony singing is ridiculous.
Well, this is what we were speaking of last night, because I used to have bootlegs of all that stuff. But yeah, just go through Abbey Road, listen to the isolated vocals, and you aren't going to find better singing. It's beyond the Beach Boys.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
It's pretty shocking. It really is. Not to belabor, the most popular.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it too much, but I'm with you.
But this was very formative. So
were they like the thing that got you? You say you started as a drummer, so was it Ringo that got you into music?
I remember seeing.
No, it was the harp. Actually, you said
it was the harp. Yeah. But I think that was only because, my parents weren't going to just go buy me a drum set.
Harmonicas are much easier. Weirdly, I find like my kids used to play the harmonicas we gave them. I don't know. It's a harsh sounding instrument in the wrong hands.
Oh yeah, I would
in the wrong mouth, I should say. Yeah,
I would play it a lot walking home from school. I had like a 20-minute walk,
Wow.
And I would just walk home from school and just toot away. I still have the first one.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
actually.
and yeah, I mean, if I have to pinpoint it, I remember seeing. I mean, my mom was always playing, especially my mom, both my parents, but my mom especially was always playing great music. There's a ton of George Harrison and Leon Russell.
Oh, nice.
All the time.
Nice.
And the Bee Gees for cleaning. You know,
just while she's cleaning?
Yeah, housework days we would.
The Bee Gees are specific to cleaning?
It was great. We'd put the Bee Gees on and away we go.
Well, I wonder why the Bee Gees in particular. It's upbeat generally.
It's upbeat. It's uplifting.
You're doing horrible work. You need something upbeat in the background.
Yeah, it's steady.
And rhythmic, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And those brothers Gibb, I mean...
No, they also talk about singing.
Holy jeez.
I don't even know how they did it.
It's pretty outrageous, too.
The Beatles were practically brothers, I always like to
Pretty
think.
much.
There's something about that mode or that range of being siblings. When I think of the Beatles thing was they were obviously trying to sing like the Everly Brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you become more brotherly as you harmonize.
And also, I think the one thing that's lost in the story with them, not to go back to the Beatles, but I don't think people quite understand, like, where those guys were coming from, especially Ringo, George, and Paul. Like, Liverpudlian poverty in the 40s. Like, I don't think people quite understand, like, the drive that those guys had to
make it.
They didn't have, George and Ringo didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity. I mean, so I think that's sort of lost in the story, which I think is also like the bond, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
But I was going to say is I remember seeing on Great Movies one night, there's a documentary, The Complete Beatles.
I have that on tape.
With Malcolm McDowell.
I have it recorded. Like I have a VHS. It's one of the first things I taped. When I taped it...
Yeah, we taped it off the TV, too.
I taped it off of PBS, I think.
Oh, right on.
So I had all the interstitial, like, the Beatles were good. Like, they wanted to sell you the Beatles. But that documentary I still maintain is my favorite. Until the anthology.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the greatest documentary. Like, I just thought George Martin's figured into it very well. And very, very heavily, rather. And I just loved it. And the footage was, I think that's a great documentary.
And I think I was 5 or 6 years old when I saw the first maybe 15 minutes of it, maybe 20 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And the performance in Washington when they're in the round.
Yeah, RFK.
Yes.
Yeah, RFK Stadium.
It was like the first date or whatever of the U.S. tour. And that footage of watching Ringo shaking the bandstand. I was like, give me some of that.
I'm the same, yeah. I was introduced to them by a cousin. It's the first music I don't know if you have a sense of memory of the first thing you heard. It sounds like you do. But the first thing I heard was definitely them. It was a comp, like a rock... they had these Beatles comps, and one of them was called, like, Rock and Roll Music Volume 1.
Volume 1, of course. Yeah, that was the second one I got.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the first thing I ever heard. It's the first thing I remember. I remember watching some TV, like... Are you from Toronto originally?
Yes.
So did you come up on like City Limits, City TV?
Absolutely.
Much music?
Absolutely. I used to get up at 5:30 in the morning before school in junior high to watch City Limits.
Okay, wow, amazing. Oh, yeah. So I had the same thing. So I remember seeing music videos, but the first thing I remember hearing was that tape, the Rock and Roll Volume 1. And so, yeah, that's what's got me on this path of listening to music and loving them.
Because the stuff that I can remember when I really draw my mind back is... probably the first music I can really remember is All Things Must Pass.
Oh, wow. Harrison.
Yeah.
This is because of your mom.
Yeah, because it was on, and when I'm, that big.
Yeah.
And Leon Russell and George are my mom's favorites.
Oh, nice.
They really are. So, and then years ago, I grabbed a copy of, I can't remember what the record's called. Maybe it's called Lady Blue, but the one with the song Lady Blue, Leon Russell hit. And I hadn't heard that since I was a kid, and I put it on and had like a nearly Proustian kind of thing where it's like, oh, I know all of this. This was on in the background.
It's a part of you.
But it was seeing that Beatles documentary. I remember sort of looking at my folks being like, why haven't you told me about this? It's like, why you been holding out? Like, and then I think it was the Long Tall Sally compilation,
right?
Which is like almost a companion to that rock and roll music.
Yeah.
That was the first tape.
First tape I ever bought from the local Kmart was the Beatles Ballads, which was another comp.
It's great.
Yeah. So anyway, the Beatles were good.
The Beatles are a good band.
And that's what kind of got you into this.
Yeah, I mean, that was the beginning. And, again, like I was into a bit of all of it. I don't know. So really getting into, because Dylan was the major, like, that's the real TSN turning point for me.
Yeah, have you seen him? I've seen him a lot.
Yeah, I've seen him 6 or 7 times, I guess, over the years.
I've seen him.
I saw him on my 19th birthday, which was pretty wild.
This is not to be competitive with you.
No.
But I've lost track. I've seen him 60 times.
Oh, far out.
Since like 1997.
Yeah, I mean, he was, until Time Out of Mind, like that whole era, when I discovered him, I was probably about 9 or 10.
Yeah.
My brother came home with the LP, the greatest hits, the classic blue.
Yep.
And I remember my family went out, and I just dropped the needle on Subterranean and Homesick Blues, because I was like, well, that's got to be awesome. And it was like literally eyes spun. It was
same
all over.
Same exact experience.
And all I was gonna say is, but from that era, because I didn't really, I was like a little snotty kid, so I didn't have the refined ears to like what he was doing from the late '80s until the late 90s. I just didn't have the ear for it then. It just seemed like he was a shell of what he was.
Right.
And Time Out of Mind was cool. I mean, the reason why I haven't seen him so many times is it's so 50-50. And the last time I saw him, it was so fantastic that I try to just leave it at that. So the last time I saw Neil Young, it was just one of the best concerts I've ever seen in my life.
Where did you see him?
I went to Kingston.
Oh, okay.
With Wolfgang Nessel, Monty Mazzanani, if you know Monty, and his wife Jill Aston. Great people. Monty works with Michael Snow.
Oh, okay.
And just some of the nicest folks. And Monty's father, Jim, who's just a total mensch.
Nice.
We drove to Kingston because I think it was a tour where he skipped Toronto. I think he went around Toronto. It was something like that.
Was he with anyone? Was he with Crazy Horse? Was he by himself?
Well, no, it was him, Chad Cromwell playing drums, Rick Rosas playing bass, and it was the last tour with Ben Keith. And Ben Keith is my favorite pedal steel player, pretty much. Him and Red Rhodes are pretty much my guys. And it was general admin in Kingston, so... And Wolfgang and I had general admin seats, and they had seats.
Okay.
And we just walked in. We were the only really psychedelic people in the place. It was great, and we didn't push it through really, but we got right to the front, and I was as far away from you as we were from Ben Keith the whole show.
Yeah,
and it was like it was a perfect concert.
I had my similar view, similar configuration at the Air Canada Centre, which is now the big arena is.
You know what? It must have been the same tour.
Well, when I saw him, Wilco was opening.
Okay,
so it was like I think I went to 2 nights of it at the Toronto big arena in Toronto. And Wilco were opening both shows. They must have been opening that tour. And he did like a day in the life. Like he did a Beatles song.
Oh yeah, he was ending shows with that, right?
So anyway, I've seen Neil a bunch too. We're talking about Bob and Neil and
rock,
the Beatles and rock. But I mean that's all part of you, and that's fair. But you mentioned the word psychedelic there.
Yes.
And you were the only psychedelic people at the show. And I want to home in on that a little bit because I feel like I really came to know of you because of this band you have, the Cosmic Range.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what it was. You work with my friend Max Turnbull, whom I've gotten to know. He used to go play as Slim Twig.
Yeah, Max is amazing.
Right. So tell me about, we were talking about early Beatles, playing the harmonica, getting into multi-instrumental stuff. It does seem to me that late 60s period of that band, or maybe mid-60s period for the Beatles, and psychedelic music in general, and the cultural aspects of psychedelia, that seems to be a big part of you on some level. Is that fair? Is that too much of a pigeonhole?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's too much of a pigeonhole. I mean, all that stuff has had a huge impact. I mean, I always go back to Michael Caroli from Can. Before he passed away, he was like, psychedelic music, all good music is psychedelic music.
That's fair.
And I mean, one thing I think is a real, our generation is, we are now reaping what we sowed, by people, all the tribalism, all these definitions,
and the requisite orthodoxy that accompanies it.
The uniforms, the terrible attitude. This is also why our generation can't honor anything. it's part of why we are losing everybody, but that's a whole other digression.
Yeah.
But this is part of it. And so psychedelic to me, Buddy Holly's psychedelic to me.
Sure.
Cecil Taylor's psychedelic. Bach's pretty psychedelic.
Okay, so let's get to that. What is psychedelic? As much as it's something that's open-ended as a term, and you're citing all these examples that people would otherwise assume are disparate.
Mm-hmm.
What does that term mean to you? And I only invoke it because the cosmic range, to me, blew my mind. And I feel like that's what psychedelia kind of does.
I guess that's what I'm saying is anything that, like going back to the 60s, where some of this nomenclature sort of comes from.
Yeah.
People forget about, rock and roll, what that term means, and then beat music. People forget about some of this terminology. And so there was beat music, and then there became like psychedelic music, And to me, it's like music for the mind and the body.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of like, free your ass, and your mind will follow, or free your mind, your ass will follow, vice versa.
Right.
And so, you saying your mind was blown by something that's exactly not the idea, but, because music is an abstract form in every permutation. It's it and dance. I mean, they're abstract arts.
Even in its structured form.
Even its most structured form, they are inherently abstract.
Right.
You can't touch it. It doesn't really exist. So to me, it's not to get too highfalutin or anything about this, but that to me is part of this stuff. And I don't really believe in like high art, low art. I don't really believe in any of that stuff. I think that was a total disaster for our generation, completely. Snobbiness, and then this notion of tearing down hierarchy. And I'm all for that in a lot of places, absolutely. But it's like if you tear down the hierarchy completely, and then it's like the Bill Evans quote about free jazz, that the danger with it out of the hands of people who have things to say and who have refined palates, essentially, or being able to acknowledge that someone runs faster than you. I mean, I used to play sports a bit when I was younger, and I learned by getting my nose broken and stuff, odd time here or there, or breaking bones, that there's always someone faster, there's always someone smarter, there's always someone better looking, there's all these things, and accepting that as part of, especially in art, and knowing that that's part of it, and being able to honor the people that are beyond you.
Right.
It's like, like I know I'll never really be as good as Simone Schmidt or Jennifer Castle.
Right.
They're like, find me better songwriters.
Right.
Find me better songwriters anywhere, period. Or Megan. I'd put those three as like my three, like...
Meg Remy,
yes.
U.S. Girls, yeah.
U.S. Girls, pardon me. And, that's... I think that this is a big part of what ended up happening. So then everybody ended up in this tribal place, as I said earlier. It became, all this like cultural baggage with stuff, instead of it being like, just people, getting into good music.
What kind of baggage?
I just remember growing up, like Mike Smith from the Cosmic Range, who's my oldest friend.
Oh, I know Mike. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's my oldest friend. We've been friends for. We're getting close to 30 years. We've been friends with each other. And there's no better musician I've ever met, still to this day. Yeah. Michael is...
unheralded in so many ways, but yeah.
He's the best. And, he and I really bonded in that time period. We met in the early 90s. And we bonded over we're kind of both jokers in a way. But, being able to be into a bit of everything, the hardcore, post-punk, that whole thing.
Yeah.
There's zero attraction for me in any of that stuff at all. And I thought the attitude with all those people was repulsive.
Huh.
And they ended up with the exact world that they deserve, unfortunately. And
which is what?
People complaining on the internet, people, having no culture.
Huh.
Also those people looking in all the wrong places, because I also think that things are a million times better now than they were in the 60s and 70s culturally. There are like it's like a 10-to-1 ratio of amazing people now than there were then. It's just that people refuse to see it. They refuse to honor it.
Those post-punk people you're talking about, I mean, a lot of their opinions were shaped by like the politics of the time.
So I'm saying the baggage or whatever. And
Sure.
I'm just talking about music. So I don't want to talk about politics
Okay,
at all.
I understand.
It's just who cares?
What I mean, your new album is called Upper Canada Blues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that evokes a kind of socio-political discussion on some level in this country, in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
What does that title mean to you?
I mean, a few things. I mean, all my work. You know, if you go back and you know, I've always tried to write about or base my work on my actual life. You know, that's even sort of what I was saying about trying. I'm obviously a work in progress, but trying to deal with what's in front of me rather than what's beyond, right? Which is even sort of what I was saying about a lot of our kind of generation. It's like so when is anything going to ever be good enough? You know, I mean, and I'm not talking about kids now. I'm not talking about that. Like we're middle-aged, you know, without dating ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
You know, but you know, even that David Berman stuff we were talking about earlier, without digressing into that.
Yeah.
But you know, so for myself, you know, in the last 10, 12 years, I guess, I just started making sure that I was writing about my actual environment. And where we're sitting right now, you know, we could walk to Upper Canada College in about 15 or 20 minutes. And I didn't grow up where we are right now. I grew up further north up here, sort of right by the border, North Toronto and North York, when those are still,
Sure.
you know, pre-amalgamation or whatever. So, you know, the shadow of Upper Canada College was always a real thing. There was always people trying to be upwardly mobile. Is that what they call it? Like, like seeking affluence.
What is that school known for?
It's very much it was like a boys' school. A very affluent boys' school.
Like a boarding school type thing? A private school?
Yes, exactly. And it was sort of the place where, you know, the most affluent people went. And, you know, and this neighborhood is very strange, especially when we were growing up, because Mike Smith, we grew up not too far from each other. And, you know, our parents were all like lower middle class, but you could walk 2 blocks and there's a mansion.
Right.
And, you know, none of that's, it was quite illuminating because you got to meet all kinds of people, shapes, sizes, colors, from people from everywhere. It's great. But it was sort of, you could feel it, you know, there were very clear boundaries.
Right.
And, you know, places you could pass through, you know.
Yeah.
It's like if I was to go down to Sonology Studios where I work with Jeff McMurrich, to get there from here, I have to go through Forest Hill.
Which is another affluent.
Another incredibly affluent, beyond Tony neighborhood in the city, which is, again, it's like we could walk there in 15 or 20 minutes.
Right.
So part of this record, not to digress too much, but part of this record, I guess, in naming it Upper Canada Blues, was being back up here, you know, as I said, sort of after being reno-evicted.
Out of necessity.
Yeah. You know, and now in this neighborhood, it has gone from being sort of a quiet suburb, which is sort of how North Toronto, the village, you know, it's very much a place, you know. That's sort of what it was. It was like a suburb in the city, and it is now a bustling, condominium-filled construction nightmare, and it's sort of ramped up that, or it feels like at least it's ramped up that affluent or aspirational affluent sort of scene. So you combine that with the fact that we are in old Upper Canada. I mean, this is where we live.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the record isn't, I wouldn't say it's inherently political, but we all know that everything has a touch of it. And so, you know, sure. I don't know, making like a soul kind of blues, like a soul record in a way, for lack of a better term, I don't know. I mean, rock and roll, soul. I don't know.
I think you've referenced Jesse Davis as an influence,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, huge influence on me.
I hear a little Harry Nilsson. I hear a little John Lennon. I hear
Lowell George was a huge influence on this record. And also growing up here, especially in the 90s, I mean, there was a big part of, this is the bond, I'm sure, with Mike and myself and a lot of our friends from then, is all of our parents were like old hippies, basically, in some degree or another, who like a friend of mine's mom bought her house up here in the 1971 for, $30,000. And
it's probably worth $1 million now.
More than that.
Yeah.
And so it was, so like I said, it was like, people who were just living a, quiet, small life.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a real, like, kind of hippie culture up here that we weren't really wired into either. We may have been into the music, but it wasn't part of, like, our, again, we were listening to everything. Like Mike introduced me to jazz when I was 13. If memory serves, the first thing he ever asked me about was Eric Dolphy.
Right.
I mean, he was hyped. He was so advanced. It was amazing. So, what I was going to say is the hippie culture. There was a huge Deadhead thing here, but like kind of the upper middle class variant, right. And the people that basically created that pushback against classic rock, the people that were so didactic about it, who were so narrow-minded,
right?
I mean, the Deadheads we used to meet then, because we were all, I mean, we had to keep it to ourselves that we were into those records,
right?
Because it was like a social disease, and the people that were into it were absolutely repulsive. At least the people we encountered.
Right.
It took me until I met a lot of my friends in the States, Matt and Erica, my friends in Woods, where it felt like it was like a breath of fresh air, because those records were scorned, but it was truly just because of the fans. It was one of those things. Huh. So anyway, it relates to this record, I think, in kind of taking on those tropes, because that was very much the environment up here, sort of the Allman Brothers, and it's like, all right, well, I'll make like a classic, we made a classic rock influenced record,
right?
I don't know, it just seemed to fit somehow in my mind, Vortex Records that was here, right. It's like we all, a ton of us, it was my friend Matt Pollock, it was a lot of us that it really informed our culture, because we were able to go and buy all these records we're talking about, for a couple bucks. I mean, it was an incredible thing. So I feel like maybe that's part of it, going back into my, it's like, what was the foundational stuff?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around you in terms of your political stance, because you made this comment about post-punk and people complaining. You've invoked the hippies. You've invoked the Deadheads, which is a different kind of hippie. Mm-hmm. You've talked about some of the things informing your sense of self and identification in Upper Canada. And I feel like some of the things you're talking about in terms of, and so you have, there's an overt political aspect to what you're doing, I think. However, you seem resistant to the notion of complaining, and I just wonder about the relationship between complaining, and I'm putting it in air quotes, and being outspoken, being someone who wants to complain as a form of protest, to make things better, to improve things, to speak out. Because I just want to, and maybe I'm being facile about this, but I'm just trying to draw a connection between some of the things you're saying.
I guess I'm just more talking about...
You've also said the music is just the music on some level. Yeah,
I mean, I guess maybe all I'm saying with that is because I'm speaking in relation to music, I guess, when I'm saying this too. Like... Yeah. So,
like I do think do you think of your musical expression, whether you're talking about an election or something, like, do you think of what you do as being some kind of inherently political statement?
I mean, I don't think of,
you don't think of it that way.
I don't know. I don't really put that being said, take the cosmic range.
Yeah.
also, I'll say this too. I mean, with a lot of the music, it's like, take Poem Unlimited, which me and a lot of
the U.S. Girls record?
The U.S. Girls record that me and the Cosmic Range worked on. Some people asked me about that record, and I was like, on a political level. And I was like, I don't really have anything to say. You can just listen to the record. It's like, just listen to the record. That's all I can sort of say about that one, at least. But take the Cosmic Range. The way I run the Cosmic Range as best I can.
How many people are in the Cosmic Range?
There's 8 of us and Jeff McMurch producing. So there's basically 9 of us.
Okay.
And, everyone's paid the same. I give everyone the same publishing.
Yeah.
It's truly egalitarian.
And a collective endeavor.
Well, it's truly egalitarian.
Okay.
And everyone's treated the same, and everyone's treated completely specifically how they are.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And so there's no scheming.
Sure.
There's no this is part of me bringing these people together. It's like my favorite people here, my favorite musicians to work with, without a doubt, and also some of my favorite people in the world. I'm sure if I was given the you can take a dozen people on a lifeboat, that's it. I'm sure they'd all be in the lifeboat.
Okay, good.
You know what I'm saying?
High praise.
So, but it's sort of, for myself, I'd prefer just the behavior and the actions to speak for themselves on a political level, however you want to look at that.
Okay.
So that, say, it's like, so how do I feel about labor? There you go.
That's evident in the way you structure the Cosmic Range.
It's self-evident. And I think that the thing that I can bring to the equation is music and art. I think that making beautiful things is a really important thing.
Do you think it has efficacy in sort of the way we, as a society, the way we behave, the way we think? Do you think music and art has that power?
I mean, maybe that's what I was saying about complaining, is that I feel like a lot of people... I spent a lot of years working in record stores, Vish.
Oh.
Yes.
Which stores? If I might ask.
Several.
Okay. In Toronto.
Yeah, I did a tenure at HMV, and I got to work with amazing people.
Like the big one?
No, I worked on Bloor Street, Holt Renfrew there.
Okay.
I got to meet Jeremy Strawn,
nice.
who is just one of
my oldest friends, actually.
And one of the most amazing people. That's how I know of you.
Yeah.
Through Jeremy.
Oh, okay.
I think I first spotted your visage at Rocket's Red Glare shows.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Who I thought were the best band.
They were amazing.
They were the best band in the country at the time, without a doubt. I mean, they were... head and shoulder. It was astonishing.
Was Rocket's Red Glare a post-punk band?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Does it matter?
I'm somewhat fixated on that. Sorry, I don't mean to be.
No, I don't. Well, I mean, maybe hardcore is maybe more the. You know what? I'm so not to go back to it, but I grew up on jazz, Bob Dylan, country blues.
Me too.
So. A lot of suburban people grinding their teeth, because we got to understand, Steve Cato is one of my very best friends.
Okay.
I met Steve a year after Mike. I love Steve. Steve's an amazing person, and Steve's someone...
I feel like Steve's been on the show. Steve was on the show.
Yeah, a long time back,
a long time
right?
ago. We talked about Block's Recording Club, which
was another egalitarian enterprise.
Yeah.
They actually did cooperative things, accepting a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm a big, Roz Talks, Gary Panter's?
Yeah.
Yeah, the manifesto.
Yeah.
It's like I believe in that stuff. You have to take care of your people.
Yeah.
And... that's part of this stuff. I mean, also, I should say I'm a big part of Meg Remy and I's friendship or connection is being like total film junkies.
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, when you asked, we got a little digress. Like, I also paint and I do a lot of photography. I do a lot of photography. And I always thought I'd become a camera operator. I always thought that, because I always knew that I'd be doing this sort of slightly off music stuff. Mike and I, we knew this since we were kids. We always, you know, it might be apocrypha or it might be a murky memory, but I remember because his mother was she's an amazing lady, great lady.
Supportive.
Very supportive. And she was very familiar with the music world, let's put it that way. And just Linda's one of the kindest people I've ever met. And she's a really good drummer too. She would jump on the tubs and play leopard skin pillbox hat.
Oh, nice.
Pretty impressed. She could swing.
Nice.
And I remember one night, because we'd sit around and listen to records and drink some wine, and we were listening to, if memory serves, at least in my memory, it's the first Raikuda record that Van Dyke Parks produced with him.
Yep.
And I remember listening to a track, and we were probably 20 or 21 years old. And we were very into country music at that point. So he and I both learned to play the banjo and mandolins, and we were also huge band fans. That's the other part of the multi-instrumental. When Mike and I met, he introduced me to those guys, because I'd heard the music through Dylan.
Yeah.
But he introduced me to that. And Richard Manuel and Rick Danko. I mean, Richard's probably one of my absolute top favorite musicians.
I made a point of going to find Richard's grave
in Stratford.
Yeah. In 2001. I took who I didn't know at all at the time really, but my now wife and I were both doing school, and we had to go to Stratford to see one of the plays. And I said, before we go to the play, and it was pouring rain, I took her and our other friend, and I'm like, we have to find this grave. I was just so obsessed with the band at the time. And I named my son after Lee Von Helm.
Oh.
So we have a lot in common.
Yeah, we got a lot in common.
Yeah, sorry.
So, no. And I digress there just to say that I remember we were listening to a Raikuda record. I think it was My Old Kentucky Home, if memory serves. And I remember she laughed, and she was like, if it was 1970, you guys would be millionaires.
Right, with the music you make.
Yeah, but then she was like, but never forget, you know, I'm paraphrasing, of course. It's a very old memory, but it was something to the effect of, like, it's not 1970.
Yeah.
Like, you get the memo, like, this isn't 1970. Like, don't expect, like, time changes everything. And if you can't get that clocked, especially with the art, you're going to be a very unhappy person, you know? And so anyway, I mean, so my digression to this was talking about photography, because I got very into cinematography when I was a teenager. And probably a third of my life's been spent watching movies. And the biggest impact on me still, I mean, I've been kind of drawing my mind back to the things that were really formative, was discovering Cassavetes and Rollins and their entire universe. And I discovered that incredibly early. Mm-hmm. I saw Killing of a Chinese Bookie late one night when I was probably 10 years old. We used to watch a lot of inappropriate things. I didn't even know what it was until years later. Right. And getting into that stuff when I was probably 15 or 16. And again, this egalitarian, homemade thing. This is homemade art.
Rather authentic, a little bit verite. Yeah,
and just like, it's like, but also for me it was, there's a great interview with him from French television. Was it Cinéaste de Temps, filmmakers of our times. And it's when they were making faces, and him talking about doing it for their delectation.
Right.
And not in some selfish way, but it's like, we are doing this for ourselves and our friends, and this is what we're doing. This is what we love. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And there's a funny line from him, because they lost, I think Woman Under the Influence cost $300,000 to make, and it made like $50 in the week that it played.
Right.
Literally. And, he's like, it cost me $300,000. And I'll spend $300,000 again on the next one. Like, I don't care. This is what I do. This is what we do.
Right.
And that always really stuck with me. And so to me, that's very political.
It is.
That's in and of itself. So I guess that's what I'm saying. And then with the music itself, because again, I mean, I guess, especially like when we were growing up, I mean, it was, the grunge era, hardcore. I mean, this was a repulsive culture to me.
Right.
Like, utterly repulsive. There was never, like, I'm good friends with Damien Abraham.
Right.
I've known Damien since we were 16, but I never found I burned through my punk rock phase when I was 11, 12 years old. So, it's a bunch of people screaming and making a bunch of racket. It was like, well, I was listening to Ornette Coleman records. And not to sound like snobby in myself, but it just seemed rather absurd. And it seemed rather classless, frankly. It's like, there was very little resonance, especially when you're listening to Bill Evans.
Well,
it's hard. It was hard to, and also it didn't seem any fun. Guys, I love rock and roll, and
I will meet you there,
and pop.
I will meet you there. There are aspects of punk and hardcore or post-hardcore that didn't. I always had fun in those zones. But people would notice me having fun and say, I noticed you were smiling while you were playing that song, and that's not normal. And so that was
this is anathema to me.
Yeah.
This is like cultural genocide.
Right.
Like, this is nuts.
Right.
And it's really and this is how this is it was just repellent to me. So
I think
the psychedelic thing, I guess.
Right.
Which again, it just sort of became like, and this goes back to my connection with a lot of the Americans, where it was I could deal with people where you could take in a whole satellite world of things. That was even a huge part of meeting Jeremy Strawn, because Jeremy and I could talk about Don Caballero and Captain Beefheart and Doc Boggs.
Freedom. I think there's something, the principle or common element to everything that you're into is that those artists and yourself are really invested in experiencing freedom, of spreading the word about freedom, suggesting that it is possible to be truly free.
Yeah, and also trying to not be didactic about it.
Exactly.
And trying to,
freedom means different things to different people.
The one thing I learned from, but one thing I learned a long time ago is, trying to tell people what to do is a big waste of time.
Yeah.
And, and maybe that's sort of what I'm saying about a lot of this stuff, where it's sort of like, also having a bunch of like skinheads, like angry white skinheads.
Yeah.
Trying to tell me that whatever garbage they're listening to is better than Sly Stone is absurd. It was absurd when I was 15 years old, and it's absurd now.
Right.
And, also how people, put up real lines around a lot of things, and in a completely self-destructive way. And and the only reason I bring up complaining is I just feel like stuff we were talking about before we came on, just how people aren't honoring a lot of stuff right now. Because like I said earlier, I mean, like I could sit here and just enumerate artists to you. We talk for an hour. And these are people that are at least, if not better, than their antecedents.
Yeah.
That's part of my thing with David Berman. I mean, Berman, like, there aren't really antecedents, first of all, because it was such a...
By his own observation, there weren't people who really followed him to push him out of the realm he'd created.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to say about him is... he is peerless, very much so. Because I will say, in his passing, revisiting the work and reading it as you listen, there aren't other songwriters that really go there. Some of Joni's stuff from the mid '70s is quite readable, but not as consistent as him.
Yeah,
it's as rigorous as Christofferson or any of or Towns, and yet, it was such a deep work. And not to say that this is somehow all of our failing, but it's like, I don't understand how people this isn't good enough.
Well, yeah, you and I connected again recently for this tribute to David in Toronto, which I appreciated you inviting me to take part in. And
absolutely, you're the first person I thought of.
It's nice. It's kind of you to do so. And I will say, I said it, I think, that night, that and I'm trying to springboard from what you were just saying before you brought up David to how I felt about David and how I've been feeling about David since we had this really impactful evening together in Toronto with everybody. Loving David because he didn't tour very much, and I think because he'd put out his records, and in fact, I was in love with this guy and his work, having never seen him for years. For years and years. It was maybe 11 years since I first heard his voice on a record, and before I got to see him play live, and that's not normal. And so it became this I was just used to liking David in a very solitary way. There wasn't a social dynamic to it. A few friends and I would talk about David and Silver Jews, but there is something like when we had that night together and people were reading his poems out loud, which I've read his poetry by myself. I've listened to his music mostly by myself.
To interject one thing, the standout, I don't have the program.
Yeah.
The woman from Edinburgh who read. I feel like that really put it over for me. It was just powerful. Anyway, sorry.
The notion of feeling like I've just sort of come to expect that certain people who are great are not going to be appreciated until they're gone. And so when David left, we all felt that. Like he didn't feel. We don't know what he was thinking, obviously, but he was sort of saying in his interviews, I've got 10 fans. Like there's 10 people who've told me they like me in my life. And he was feeling, which can't be true, I don't think, but I think that you're onto something there on a I don't know, philosophical level, as something going on within us where we need to really praise the people that deserve it.
Well, my friend John Maloney, who he's been the leader of Sunburned Hand of the Man out of the East Coast. And John's one of my favorite people I know. Very, very insightful, very funny man. And I think he said this in The Wire magazine 15 years ago. He referred to it as the arm folder generation. And I remember laughing with him about this a couple years ago and talking about how, because again, I'm not talking about kids. Like I'm not, I'm not talking about kids right now.
Like I'm not talking about our generation.
I'm talking about our generation, exactly. I'm just trying to let the listeners know that I'm not like some old fart complaining about kids. It's the furthest thing from it with this. But our generation, that everyone came to events, they would fold their arms, and the joke John and I made, or John made really, was that everyone stands there, they watch what's happening on stage, and say, I could do that.
Right.
If I had X, Y, Z. And especially the sort of more academic-y part of things, which we experience a lot here. It's part of the Canadian thing, which is part of why I radiate more to the down south.
Yeah.
It's sort of just more about work. I look at all this very, very blue collar too, and I don't mean that as I'm some working class hero sitting in my, Tony apartment in Midtown Toronto.
Yeah.
But that's always how I've looked at it. So maybe even all that baggage, like I'm not putting all this stuff, it's like me putting out Upper Canada Blues that isn't my entire identity being foisted on the world.
Right.
That isn't how it works for me. It's work. You work for the music, you work for the songs, you do as best you can, and then you move along, rather than it having all these other things going on. Also, people don't have, humor is a big part of my world too. And not to say that people shouldn't be completely bent right now. Like, I think anyone's justified in almost any state of mind at this point.
It's rough out there.
It is, but it's but again, talking about from the creative place, it's like my friend Wolfgang Nessel, who I mentioned earlier, Wolfgang and his partner Victoria Chong, who goes by New Chance, who makes amazing music, and Victoria's a fantastic artist.
Yeah.
Just does awesome stuff.
Yeah.
But they ran Healing Power Records, which was a small imprint here in Toronto.
Yeah.
I think I'm not sure if it's continuing. It's definitely in, chill. I know they haven't put anything out in a while, but they represented a lot of the underground here. And Wolfgang and I used to present a lot of events. We did a festival here in 2006 called The Bummer in the Summer.
Oh, yeah.
Named after the Arthur Lee song. Mm-hmm. Also, the opening night of the festival was the day Arthur Lee died, which was a completely cosmic happenstance, which there isn't, but Wolfgang and I, from the very beginning, going back to that period, we always just talked about, and with our friend Marco Landini, who helped us with that festival, and Iris Fraser, the filmmakers, and Aaron Lumley. There was a gang of us, about 5 or 6 of us, who really put that together. But we talked about just creating the option. That is sort of the fundamental to this, which I think in and of itself is a very political act without it being overtly political, without having to smash people over the head with it. It's like, no, it's up to us to create an option for people to radiate to. Right. Because that's sort of how I see this stuff without being a complete flake with, hair to my behind. But that's sort of what this stuff is. Also, that attitude from the 90s, the grumpy, too cool for school snob thing, it was ludicrous to me. Still ludicrous to me. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. Right. That was a huge part of Mike and I's bond. We just couldn't believe it. The self-seriousness of the whole trip. Especially with someone like Mike who, Mike's, without being hyperbolic, Michael's the finest musician. There's no one better. Yeah. I can I can futz around with some of these things. I can play a few instruments well, but he's on a whole other level, and he's like a symphonic person. Yeah. So a bunch of people, I don't know, just a bunch of rather affluent people being cheesed off, and that being their cultural trip, and then kind of tearing down people who are demonstrably better than them, take Rocket's Red Glare. I remember seeing those guys play for the first time, and I didn't sit there and gnash my teeth being like, oh my, they make, aren't I such a loser? I don't see it that way. It's like, wow, look at what they're making. Yeah. Let's tell everyone we know. Right. This is an amazing thing to behold. And, this is endemic of people, and this isn't just, but I think that this stuff really got ratcheted up during the 90s into the aughts. And then people also kept, it's like, people are still reading the New York Times. It's like mind-bending to me.
What do you mean?
It's crazy. These, I don't know, just stuff that's it'd be like me complaining about, can you believe that Rolling Stone is no good? It'd be like kvetching about that. It's like, yeah, these things, these outlets have been rubbish for decades.
Right.
And yet everyone still goes back to the well, and it's like everyone watching the least bad thing on Netflix.
I understand.
And it's like, Charlemagne Palestine's still alive. Marion Zazila and Lamont Young are still alive. David Hammonds is still alive.
Right. Why are we not...
David Hammonds is still alive.
Why are we stuck on...
William Eggleston is still alive.
Why are we not celebrating them?
Robert Frank died last week.
Right.
And it's like, and then everyone bloviates about all this stuff, and it's like, well, yeah, 94-year-old guys do die. But it sort of gets into this thing where it's like, well, yeah, maybe you should have, maybe people, Henry Flint lives. I could go on and on and on.
Right.
And, it's... people, it's maybe also, let's be honest too, the wealth of stuff coming to the surface in the last 15 years, because there is no underground anymore.
Right.
The underground is gone. If you want to read a good little bit on that, David Keenan, who the novelist now, who wrote England's Hidden Reverse, the book on Coil and all that, Nurse with Wound, who's a major Wire contributor. He and his wife Heather Lee, who's Heather Lee's one of the best musicians out there. She plays with Peter Brotzman, pedal steel player.
Okay.
She was in Cher Lambity's, the Texas psychedelic band with Tom and Christina Carter. Amazing people, but Heather Lee and David ran a distro / record store called Volcanic Tongue in Glasgow, and Volcanic Tongue was like, I mean, it was one of the most important public services anyone's done in the last several decades. It was, David would, every week there would be an update on what they were carrying in the store, and I mean, I think David wrote a couple million words in the end about underground records over a 10-year period, 8 to 10-year period, and they were the place to get real underground records when that was still a thing, when you could you could exist, you could, and between the internet and just all the mitigating financial problems with the early 21st century, they folded up about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and he wrote an essay in The Wire called Subterranean Homesick Blues, which was about him and Thurston talking about how there was no underground anymore.
Right. So
all I was going to say about that is, this flood of stuff, all the things that were once completely hidden, it's like the theater of the eternal music, or the theater of eternal music, the Lamont Young stuff. I mean, you couldn't, you could root around and sniff it out, and it was incredibly hard to hear any of that stuff. There was micro editions then, even on file sharing, you couldn't hear any of that music. You can walk into any record store in the world and buy that stuff now for $40. It's all, it's like, or a lot of the Japanese stuff.
Is this good or bad?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think access is incredible.
Yeah.
It's like take Max Turnbull. I met Max. I guess Max was probably 15 years old when I met him. I was working at CD Replay on Yonge Street beside the old Uptown Theatre at Yonge and Bloor in Toronto, and it was me and a couple guys and a bunch of high school girls were at the store, and one of whom was Simone TB, the drummer, who was in a band called Tropics with Max Turnbull. And Simone plays with all kinds of people. He plays a partner, and Simone Schmidt in those bands. And Simone TB is just still one of my best friends. She's my drummer now.
Darlene Shrug. Thank you.
I mean, it's like, I'm trying to put all together, but
Simone and Max are on this show together, actually.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
And and Simone's been playing all the shows I've been doing for these LPs.
Right.
It's been amazing, and we hit it off instantly, and they were like 15, 16-year-old kids, and meeting them then, this is probably, I don't know, 04, 05, something like that, somewhere in that zone, and I met Anthony Nemeth, who works in that crew. Tony goes by Tony Price.
He works with Ben Cook.
Yeah, Ben Cook, and he works with Meg Remy as well.
Right.
Anthony recorded Upper Canada Blues and the Some Horses Run album that I put out last year. And meeting all of those kids, it was amazing because this was, file sharing was happening. I think YouTube had surfaced, or I can't remember if it was there yet. I was pretty out of all that stuff. I mean, I just got a mobile like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. We've been trying to connect. I know. Yeah.
And meeting them and how versed they were in the German music, the British progressive stuff, heavy stuff. I was just kind of blown away, and I could see the access and being like, okay, so the people that are going to get into this now are going to get all the way in. They're going to get up to their armpits, which we couldn't really. I mean, we could find some of those records, but I'm still buying records now that I've been looking for since I was 13 years old.
Right. And they're available. They're more readily available now.
Yeah, I mean, but stuff that like they only existed in our imagination a lot of times. It's like you was reading lists, and now we literally anything we could walk on YouTube and boot it up and listen to it. And I mean, I think it's overwhelming thing that leads to comfort food. I know it does for me, certainly, like when it comes to culture. It's like sitting there being like this endless panoply of stuff. I mean, you can't just live on Ubu Web. It's like it can be a little tiring.
It also seems to me, and I mean, this might just be my time of life, but I wonder if an artist like David Berman would cultivate the kind of close listening he deserves in this atmosphere when there's just so much you have to keep up with. And, you mentioned the level of content that's available to be immersed in is amazing, but I go through it all the time. Like I can't, in my work, I'm just constantly listening deeply as I can to a record, talking to someone like you, and then probably moving on. Whereas as a youth, I can still rap every lyric on the first Wu-Tang album because I listened to it over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And the same with David or somebody like that, or Pavement or whoever. Like I would just... It's probably a time of life thing. There's probably kids doing that still, but it's interesting because we're more conditioned to be omnivores culturally and be on top of every TV show, movie. Like everyone's talking about a thing. I got to do the thing. Like its promotion is so weird now.
Which see, this is maybe what goes back to what I was saying about honoring things, because if we leave it up to the PR. My dad used to always say this. He was like, my dad's been saying this since the 80s. It's like, is that public relations will win and we will all lose because of it, basically.
But it's more insidious now.
Well, and here's what I was going to say,
They've turned PR and we're the PR.
Exactly.
On social media talking about Beyonce's new hat or whatever.
This is what I'm saying. It's like, also the way I look at life, essentially. I mean... by looking at any one thing, you're inherently not looking at everything else. It's the nature of vision. So, as you said, it's like, if everyone's rubbernecking the same cultural dumpster fire, this is like what's always driven me crazy. Also, I'm voracious. I read the news, like I read 3 or 4 newspapers every day, and I probably read 5 or 6 music blog, paper, whatever, every day. You know who's in the news every day? Every single day. If this doesn't make you want to slit your wrist, nothing will. Weezer, Blink-182, and David Bowie. They got a news story every single day because the machine is on. Yeah. It is set to high, and they will get a news story every single day. And if that doesn't make you want to kill yourself, I don't know what does. Wow. And it's absolutely repulsive. Yeah. And it's like, this is all garbage. Bowie's got some good tracks, but it's like, are you kidding me? It's like, are you this is, I mean, it's like a nightmare.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that, what you're saying is that what needs to happen is, no, I should not say that, because I should not say what anything, I should not, I will not prescribe anything.
Sure.
But good example, this summer, my friend Kevin Morby, who is an old friend of mine and who's just amazing. If you get a chance to see him and his new band, the Oh My God band, it's the best show I've seen probably in a couple years. And one of the most uplifting things I've seen in a very long time. It was a sold out show at the Opera House. I was taking some pictures backstage, and I got to look out at the crowd. And it was a sea of people, all shapes, sizes, colors, ages, a lot of young people. And I got to see people singing along to every word, people crying. And, him, who else? I mean, like my friend Steve Gunn, Meg Baird, like a lot of people that I know, I'm checking in on with them about what's going on out there. And it's like, you know what? Like people are down. There's like a real need for this stuff. Maybe that's what I'm saying about all this, is there's a real need for this stuff. And that people need to be, like I said earlier, like the Bill Graham, to go back to 60s rock and roll, who was the promoter and who basically made the San Francisco scene.
The Fillmore, yeah.
The Fillmore. See, I'm really into certain numerical things and statistical stuff sometimes. So the Fillmore and the Avalon are the 2 rooms he booked. fit like a couple thousand people in them. There was like 800,000 people living in San Francisco at that point. That's it.
Uh-huh.
They filled those places 2-3 nights a week, all the time. And part of the deal was, his line was, you blow people's minds. So one person brings 2 people. The next time, those people spread. And the small is beautiful does slowly grow.
Yeah, right.
And again, I'm not talking about some huge global takeover. I think this is a big part of the sales pitch that happened to our generation, was it's like, oh, so you're either a millionaire or you're a loser. It was just like total binary.
Right.
Rather than being like, really, can't we just like make some stuff, continue to make some stuff, slowly grow, which is a huge part of me binding with Matt and Erica. Because, I mean, them, my friends Woods, you know, these aren't people that are on the cover of magazines. These aren't, you know, and yet they've been doing a small, slow thing. I mean, I always call it clients. An old friend of mine who's a health worker, he always just say to me, he's like, just look at it all as your clients.
Right.
The people that are, and not in like I'm above you, I'm selling you something, but being like, no, these are the, you know, so as long as you deal with your clients, and, you know, if you have 50 clients this year and you got 100 next year, that's 100% growth.
Right.
You know, and so I only bring up that Bill Graham stuff too, because take Toronto. This has been losing me, you know, bookings. But there's 6 million people in Toronto. There's 6 million people here.
Right.
And, you know, it's hard to book a 200-seat venue without a hassle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the onus is completely on the artist, without getting into all this stuff. And that there's nobody who's like hyping stuff. That's sort of what I'm saying. It's like the voices who used to be like, direct your eyes this way. For whatever reason, a lot of turkeys got deputized, first of all. I still can't believe some of the people that boiled up to the top. I mean, it's just flabbergasting to me. And then people just don't seem to pay attention also to the really great people, like Amanda Petrusic,
yeah,
you know, Jesse Jarnow, you know, there's some really good people out there writing like really powerful, thought-provoking stuff that could really get people into stuff.
Right.
But, you know, it's it doesn't get the eyeballs, even from the people who are supposed to be the people. Maybe that's sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's like that was something I learned from record stores, was like all the people that, you know, talk the biggest talk. It's like gear stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's like all these guys who had now their homes, you know, rather than being full of trading cards, are now full of modular synths.
Right.
You know, it's like so depressing.
Yeah.
It's like, show me a record.
Well,
or show me some joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
like that's, you know what I mean? It's like,
I do.
It's like, you know, if you're going to collect stuff and whatever, go right ahead, but have some joy about it, and don't lord it over or whatever.
I mean, for your part, you've been very prolific of late. I mean, we're talking about a record that you made 2 weeks after finishing your other solo record.
Yeah.
There's a Cosmic Range record that came out this year as well.
Yeah, in February.
Yeah. So what's next for you? Do you already have a plan?
There's another songwriter record that Jeff McMurrich and I are just finishing up. Hopefully going to be out in the springtime. It's more hi-fi. Let's put it that way.
Oh, okay.
It's a bit more fastidious. Let's put it that way. Still recorded here at the house, but I think it's a bit of a step up. So I'm just working on that. Was in the studio last week, gonna be in there later this week. I've been doing some recording with my friends from the band Mr. Joy, who are a local band. Very, very Elephant Six. Almost Canterbury, like sort of Robert Wyatt-y in ways. Some of the nicest guys I've met in a really long time. Really good spirit. They make a great sound. And I got a real soft spot for a lot of that, like Olivia Tremor Control and that stuff. Yeah. And they're really young guys, so it was great. You know, we were working and I was like, oh, this sounds just like dusk at Cubist Castle, and they didn't know what I was talking about, which is marvelous, which is maybe going back to what we were saying. It's like people are going to, because people get to this place through a million different routes.
Sure.
You know, and then it just becomes, because to me it was always about sharing the stuff, right? Like, I'm the person that if I ask you, like, hey, you know, you ever seen Casablanca? And you say no, I don't roll my eyes. I'm like, awesome. That means we get to watch Casablanca, right?
Sure.
Like that, or at least I do my best to imbue that. You know, I know I can also be like, you know, I was a terrible grumpy record store guy. I'm still getting over that. But Mr. Joy stuff. So we're working on that. We might call it Dr. Joy. We've been sort of joking about that. Okay. Because people call me Doc.
Oh, right. Why do they call you Doc?
You have to ask MV.
Okay.
MV lays handles on.
So you're Matthew Doc Dunn is what you go by.
Yeah, usually, because I got a lot of credits with just Doc and stuff. So
right. And
I respond to, if you yell Matthew or Doc or Dunn at me, those are the three things that'll make me turn my head.
Okay, got it.
So I have that stuff on the horizon. What else? There's an album called Stonegrass that I made with my friend Jay Anderson, the drummer.
I know Jay.
Jay and I have played in a million projects over the years. We were in a band called the Spiritual Sky Blues Band a bunch of years ago that was never really documented.
Okay.
It was the two of us and Gavin Deanda from Saffron Sect and The Gnostics and whatnot. And Gavin's living in Montreal now, and you know, I've also been trying to document a lot of stuff that wasn't documented properly way back.
Okay.
You know, there was a lack of urgency in documenting a lot of things from a lot of people around here. So Jay and I made that with Anthony Nemeth, and it's instrumental, and that's going to come out really soon. There's the Live Woods tape that's come out on my label that is just finished, called Live Love, that is a compilation of recordings my friend Ayal Sr. made from the Herschel Savage American Flag Band.
Okay.
And I'm playing on a lot of it, and there's a bunch of other fun people on it, and so that's out. And hopefully some more Cosmic Range stuff. We're getting into some work. I'm hoping maybe we can get some more backing band work like we did with US Girls on Poem Unlimited, which was a big part of why I put that band together. I've always been a big fan of studio bands and just studio work in general. Yeah. And you know, that was even part of probably Mike and I's multi-instrumental thing. You know, the idea of you can cut down on numbers by having people doubling, and we have a really, you know, kind of interesting skill set. I'm hoping some stuff will come of that, because I really enjoy it, you know.
Well, I mean, it's astounding. It's an amazing body of work already, and I thank you for the work you've done.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work, if possible?
The best place to go right now is to go on the Cosmic Range Records Bandcamp page. Okay. I think if you pretty much Google my name, that's the first thing that comes up. I don't do social media. Like I said, I didn't have a mobile until someone gave me one a couple weeks ago. Sort of a, you know, or actually the irony is it was given to me about a year ago and it sat on my shelf for a year.
I actually want to interject because as you were talking about your lack of cell phone engagement, I went on my cell phone because as we've been speaking here, I thought about the fact that I suggested that the Beatles would have played RFK Stadium in 1964.
No, because RFK was still
Robert
alive.
F. Kennedy. Why would they have named it that? I don't know what I was thinking, but it was actually called the Washington Coliseum.
The Coliseum, yes, exactly.
But for some reason in my head, maybe now it's called the RFK. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if the Coliseum was renamed.
I don't even know if that's true. I think RFK is a stadium.
Right. Yeah, because RFK is where the name that the team that should not be named plays. Yes, and it's outdoors.
I just thought of it as like about half an hour ago. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I got that wrong. I'm going to fix this.
Oh, don't get me.
So you're telling me about not using your phone. Sometimes these phones come in handy.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm pretty unimpressed, but hey, it's it's come in handy. Yeah. I get it. I also understand why people were incredibly cheesed off at me for not having one.
Yeah,
of those
they're handy
things.
for getting in touch with people too.
Yeah, I was getting a little too isolated from the world, which is sort of what I do anyway.
But you're on Bandcamp.
I'm on Bandcamp, so you can access the records there.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of uploading a lot of the old tapes and the old private press records and stuff, sort of more of the avant-garde, for lack of a better word, which is a terrible word for this stuff. The instrumental music, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to start uploading a lot of that stuff to the Bandcamp, and you can just get in touch with me directly there.
Okay.
There might be an Instagram page going up for the label. I cannot confirm or deny that happening, but that's the best way for people to find me.
Okay.
And even taking a little dip into Discogs, because it's a rather voluminous.
Yeah, you've been prolific.
Fairly prolific.
It's good.
Thank you. Especially with Matt and Erica and some of the other things, and a lot of session work up here for a lot of even people that are in the range and stuff. I'm on people's stuff, so and I do my best to try to, not to sound too weird, but try to be on records that are good, so you can dig in and it's not like a whole, it's like, okay, maybe there's some good stuff here. So
Upper Canada Blues, is it on a label?
No, I'm privately pressing all this stuff. I'm the label boss.
Okay.
Cosmic Range Records is my label.
Okay.
And then the band is the Cosmic Range.
Right.
Which is maybe a little confusing, but it all feeds sort of back into the same place.
I'm figuring it out. If I can figure it out, most people can figure it out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I also, I'm sitting here talking to you. But a little mystery. It was always kind of fun part of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you don't want to always show your full hand.
You've done some press though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'll do the press.
Yeah, I mean, with the right people.
Right. Well, I appreciate you making time for me.
Yeah, I'm not trying to blow smoke.
No.
It's like people I want to talk to for sure. And also, I will say that the Berman stuff you posted was a really wonderful talk.
Oh,
and
thanks.
And it was, that was a big part of me being like, of course I'll talk to Vish.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
No,
it means a lot.
Yeah,
yeah. If there's a song from Upper Canada Blues that we can go out on for people to hear, what would you pick?
I'd probably put on Runnin' Right Out.
Running Right Out. This is the penultimate song on this record.
Yeah, we'll play that one, because...
Why?
I think it's... MV and I used to always joke about having the Willie Nelson song in your kit bag, as in, if you met Willie Nelson, is there a song that you wouldn't feel embarrassed to play for Willie Nelson?
Oh, of your own.
Of your own.
Right.
And using that as like a
standard.
Yeah, very much so. Being like, could you do you have a song that you wouldn't be completely embarrassed singing for Willie Nelson? And I think that's maybe that.
Okay.
And I think it's got a nice hook.
All right, we'll leave it at that. It's mysterious. It's a downer, but
and it's
good.
A downer, which is great.
It's good. This is Running Right Out from Upper Canada Blues by Matthew Dunn. Matthew, thank you so much for this time and for having me in your home, and I wish you the best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you, Vish. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Matthew Doc Dunn for appearing on this, the 515th episode and the first of the year 2020 of Creative Control, the first episode of Creative Control in the year 2020. And Creative Control is still part of the Entertainment One podcast network and available on all iOS and Android platforms, and also on things like Spotify and Audio Boom and YouTube and all those things as well. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for in any of those things, or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook and follow the show on Twitter at vishcreative, or follow me directly at vishkhanna. Also, please visit patreon.com/creativecontrol to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. And once again, we have a $6 and above tier now. Anything $6 and above, you get exclusive access to content from my audio archives, and I'm uploading those whenever I can. So at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, depending on what's going on. So again, patreon.com/creativecontrol to support the show. And thanks again to Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, and Grandad's Donuts for their in-kind support for this show. And always Jim Guthrie. Thank you, Jim. Jim lets me use some music of his on this show, and you can learn more about him at jimguthrie.org. And finally, thank you very much for listening to this podcast and telling your friends to do the same, and subscribing to the show and all the things you do. I appreciate it very much. And I will talk to you very, very soon. Here's to a happy new year, 2020, and let's do this together. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.